Hey guys, welcome back to Heart of the Hero, Tools for Successful Minds. I'm here with Greg. I'm Dan. Here at Tools for Successful Minds, we really like to just get into the practical problems that you're going to deal with while going through your journey towards success in whatever area that is, and we too have done it. We've learned, taken in lots of information. We've had a lot of experience that we want to share with you guys, and some of our struggles that we believe are very synonymous with a lot of people's struggles that, come along. And so, we really are just dedicated to trying to make the world a more successful place. We'd like to see people get the most out of themselves and reach a point of self-actualization. So that's something we were really passionate about. Both Greg and I can speak for both of us on that. And so what are we getting into today, Greg?
Man, that was beautiful. It was beautiful. If you are listening today and maybe you're just tuning in, getting hype, you see this, you see the title, you see what we're talking about. We're talking about mindfulness and you, and specifically how being present, right? The power of now, understanding you are the now, how it works, staying, not getting pulled off by these thoughts and, these experiences, and really staying deeply present, right? How that actually affects your success, your life, and can actually change the things that you want, but also how fast you're going to get there, right? How fast you're going to move towards the success that you really want and you desire, and the things that you want in your life.
Yeah. And I mean, it's something that is a little bit of a topic that doesn't get discussed really from this standpoint too often. You hear a lot of how to reach this kind of, when you hear mindfulness, you kind of think of, more spiritual and more, kind of maybe Buddhist, and one with selfness. It's these a lot of like airy, heady, kind of hard to understand if you don't understand it, concepts. But we're going to talk about it from a much more practical way, where we want to explain how, mindfulness can benefit you, and being able to be present is something that is one of, we believe, the most important things for anybody's success. I mean, it's just one of the keys we believe, the tools for a successful mind is being present. And we're going to talk about some of the, the negative, consequences to not being present. We're going to talk about some of the positive consequences from being at a place of present while you're doing. Well, I mean, honestly, the idea is every day, every moment of your life, but, we're going to focus a little bit on specifically, when you're actually practicing your craft, or you're researching, you're reading, or you're studying, or you're rehearsing, whatever it is that you do to, perfect yourself and perfect your craft and make you become an expert. We're going to talk about why being present is a vital tool for you to push through maybe some, we'll get into some of the resistances that might come. And if you're already since you're already on your journey, you already know a little bit about what we're talking about, depending on what level of commitment you're at, of some of the resistance that I'm talking about.
Yeah. And I think a good way maybe start and kind of lead into this, give you a little bit of light shed on what this actually is, because there are people who are doing this, right? There are people who, maybe you have an understanding of mindfulness or meditation, or, you're very, very much into learning how to be more present, right? But there's a practical way you can think of this in terms of what it's actually going to do for you, right? So I kind of want to define it, right, in a sense of aiming it, directing it, orienting it towards your own success and your own things that you want, right? So you could say that mindfulness, right? Presence, being present, staying in the now, is essentially just your ability to be where you are and be doing what you're doing. And that seems simple, right? That seems like a very easy thing to start to do, but you gotta recognize that a lot of times we as individuals and people who you may know don't actually spend most of their time doing things as they are, right? We overlay them. We think about other things. We are not where we are. We're thinking about, we've got to take our kid to this thing, or we've got to talk to this person, right? So the point is, and we'll get into some of the reasons why that is so useful later, right? Why it actually gets you what you want, why it gets you that, deep level of success that you probably want to taste if you're on this journey, why that happens, right? But all you need to know for now, right, and the thing to really stick in your mind is that to be present, right, it's just doing what you're doing and being where you are. So I think it could be useful to maybe shed some more light on what a person might be feeling, right? What a person might be feeling if they're not this yet. And I mean, in their life, they know they need to be present, right? Because that's why you're here. You want to learn more mindfulness techniques. You want to learn how to stay more present. You want to feel better about the way that you're actually interacting with your environment in a real and deeply present way. But maybe you don't see all the signs, right? Maybe you don't see all of the little minds in your life that are actually making you feel worse because you're not as present, right? So what are some of the things that someone might be dealing with right now if they're not as present as they would like to be?
Well, I mean, I think it's important to, I mean, I don't know about, for me, but what it feel, the feeling behind it is a kind of a resistance to what you're doing often, there, because your mind is really a place of presence is to be in a place of no attachment, and where you don't have any things pulling, and you're not wandering off in that thought of something else in your head. Thoughts come to you. It's kind of like when people describe, when you encourage somebody to meditate, or somebody's encouraged you to meditate, and probably, the common response is, well, I just can't get my mind to be quiet. I can't stop my mind from thinking, and it's that kind of, that's kind of what we're trying to get at here is today, is that we don't want you to go empty, but some of the things you're going to feel when you're, when you're working is a kind of a pull, like, oh, did this person text me? And it's going to manifest as your own thoughts. It's going to manifest as things that you want to do, fun things, like fun distractions, productive things. Those are all those are everything. There is no thought that isn't distracting you or pulling you. It's pulling your attention. It's splitting your attention. And so one of the things I think that we go through, when we're trying to stretch ourselves and we're pushing it, we're in that time of grind where, we've sacrificed a lot of time, and we've made, we're really hyper focused, and we're starting to feel it. We're kind of getting tense and a little stressed and a little more aggravated with people. We can kind of see it and feel it, that we're just like, I'm ready for a break. I'm ready for something. I can't do this. But you need to, you want to keep pushing, and you want to keep pushing, and you got to keep going. What you can feel in those times is this, if you ever texted somebody and they, read your text message, and then they didn't say anything, and it was a question that you asked them. So you're actually waiting for a response, and then you try to go back to doing what you're doing. And when you're doing it, you're like, and then you pick up your phone. Nope, they didn't text me. You pick up your phone. No, they didn't text me, because you're split, and so I think that's one thing that you can kind of often feel, and that's just one. I don't know about you guys, but my brain does that with multiple things sometimes. So becoming present was being mindful and very in the moment. That when Greg says only do what you're doing, I mean, he means that is that the only thing that you should be experiencing, right? Because we experience our thoughts. We kind of either hear them in our head or see them in our head, or we can kind of picture memories in our head, but those aren't physical manifestations. Those are images in our mind. And so we're experiencing those thoughts, and we're experiencing these emotions, and we're experiencing what we're doing in front of us. But when he says only do what you're doing and only be doing what you're doing, he means exactly that, and quite literally that even your mind should only be on what you are doing. There should be no 2 or 3 thought trails that are passively running in your mind, and you're keeping on, kind of the back burner and processing while you're focusing on things. That's not being fully present, being worried and being worried about you not having got things done, and waiting on a text message, waiting on a call, getting distracted by, TV. Just these things are demands and pulls. And when you're sitting there thinking about it, you're not actually fully present in what you're doing, And so I think that's something that you can experience is this kind of massive pull in other directions. And it can come up in genuine, genuine, well, I don't need to do this, I've already done enough. I could stop here, I'm fine. I could stop here. I did good today. I could stop and go do things. It can come up that genuine, that soft, and it's a little soft pull, oh, good job, Dan. So you can stop now, right? Go ahead. You've done enough. You've been working for 40 minutes. You're fine. You've done something. You're good. Or oh man, I really need to go organize my closet right now. I haven't done that in a while. And I keep telling myself I need to do that. So, that's a priority. I need to go do that. And it's like little things that like don't sound like they're resistance, but they are, because you're not present in what you're doing. You're thinking about other things while you're attempting to be somewhere or do something else. So I think that kind of nature of being pulled away from your task is what you got to notice. You got to notice that that's probably where most people are at with this, where when they, especially at the the beginning to middle ground of grinding, especially at the beginning, you guys remember, it was tough to keep yourself on task at first, and that was, and so I think that's one of the reasons, is because one of the main reasons is we're not present fully in what we're doing, and that experientially feels like you're just being pulled and distracted, and going through your life as if, oh, I just have to do these things, or oh, I need to do this, or oh, it's okay, you can stop, and convincing yourself whatever you do, it's that's kind of one of the first things I think you'll notice.
And I remember I used to know this girl who I kind of used to get into conversations with about stuff like this a lot. It was different because I never considered myself a strong multitasker, right? I never did. But I think one of the big obstacles, right, that a person will see fairly quickly, and you may not notice it, but I want to tag it so that when it comes up, you'll say, oh, this is what I'm doing, right? So there's this idea, and it is huge resistance. There's this idea that what that is, right? The ability to be present, but also be doing other things in your mind, right? You're thinking about your plans for tomorrow. You're thinking about that process, that idea. People call that multitasking. Right? You say, well, I'm just multitasking. I'm thinking about this while I'm doing this. I'm at a basketball game while I'm thinking about what I'm making for dinner, and it's important to me, and I need to do that. Well, it's almost like you didn't decide to do what you were going to do, right? Because you're actually experiencing wherever it is that you are, whatever it is that you're doing. So how are you experiencing that, right? How is thinking about something that's not that, doing something different in your head, right? Planning for something that's not happening right then. What is that doing to your experience itself, right? Like maybe you're with you're with a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a lover, a parent, whatever. Probably shouldn't lump those together, but you know what I mean? Like you're with someone who matters to you, right? You're with someone who matters to you, and in that space, in there, because you're thinking about other stuff, right? You're planning for other things, and so you might say, right? Someone might argue with me and say, well, I'm just at a basketball game. It's no big deal. Like I just want to plan for this. And I just want to, I'm going camping tomorrow and I want to make sure I have all my stuff. So I'm doing a checklist in my head. Right. And that experience, if I argue with you about it, right, you'd be like, well, that's not a big deal. It's just a game. Right. But the problem with that is that's the same experience that you're having as you are with someone who matters to you. It's something that can never be repeated. Right? It can never be repeated in that way again, right? You decided to do it. And if you really are there, right? If you're really aware and you pay attention, there are things that might happen, right? You might have some exploratory thoughts like, oh my God, that was amazing, or meet some people you'd never seen, right? So the story, there was this girl who I used to do a lot of self-work, right? Meditation, this kind of stuff to really start to get my brain to focus better, right? And I would talk about this sometimes. It was never an argument or anything, but it was like, I would explain, yeah, my process really is I'm just doing one thing at a time. I'm not hugely good at multitasking because I don't think it's a really an efficient way to work, because how could you do that, right? And she had this tendency, and maybe you have this too, or somebody, right? You'll sit down to do your work, right? But you'll be doing a bunch of other stuff. So you've got your phone right beside you with Facebook up and other social media, whatever, text, like all this stuff is up, right? You got food next to you and you're really not eating it, but it's there because you started eating it and then you stopped so you got all this stuff, right? All these distractions, the TV's running, all these things. And so what happens is your attention, right? It's very, very loose. It's very diffused because you're supposed to be focused on writing the report or doing the one thing that you came to do, that you decided to do, but instead you're doing this thing, and then you go over here, 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 and every time you do that, right, it makes your work less sharp because you're spending time away from it. You're not able to generate the momentum in, let's say you're writing. Well, the way that works is you need to be in the writing, right? You need to be present with that. And it works like that with everything, right? So I think one of the biggest obstacles that you may not even be aware of yet is that if you start to think of multitasking, right, as most people think of it, as not being present, as just, you just label out, okay, just for now, you don't have to hold this, but just for now, right? You could think about it like this. Maybe, what if that is a manifestation? What if that's a way that people just don't be present? What would that do for me? Maybe I could let that go, right? Because if you do, and you start to look at that as something that's kind of negative, something that's kind of inhibiting your experience of being mindful and staying present, you'll notice, and you'll connect a lot of dots to where things that you thought might be beneficial that you were doing were not beneficial. They're actually negative, right? And maybe we could get into some conversation about that, because I think that's a huge obstacle.
Well, and you were saying the negative from not being present. Is that what you're basically saying? What are some of yeah, and I mean, there's a time where you'll find that you do a lot of stuff, but you don't actually get anything done. Or, do you ever have a conversation with somebody who talks a lot but doesn't actually say anything? You ever had one of those conversations where like you've said one thing, but it was a 7-minute, spiel they gave you on, this one thing, and like you haven't said much in there, and it's kind of like you can kind of sit down in front of your computer and pull up your work and stare at it and then wonder what you need to do, and you don't really have a great daily process set up, and you need to fix that. So I need to make a list. So I'm gonna go make a list, and then I'm gonna go, okay, so now I know what I'm supposed to do. So which should I do first? And like, well, I could take a break. You kind of get to this place where you're so scattered that you're not actually able to land on any like one thing. You're not actually able to give, nothing that you have that you're supposed to do is getting any of your full attention, because you're kind of scattered between all of these projects. So it's like, all these tasks, you're never just doing one thing. You're constantly thinking and wondering and worrying about other things, so that your goals, your projects, your daily tasks are never given the full effort that they require. I mean, you're the full attention, and that's the thing, is it's attention. It's what are you experiencing? Where is your focus? Because if you're like me, and Greg and I, as similar as we are in our perspectives, we are very different in the way that we consciously experience the world, right? And that's one thing you have to understand, that this is something that you're kind of, that you're going to kind of fight your own battle with trying to be present, each person. I'd say there's, a large group, but there probably is a set amount of groups of different ways of experiencing it, all individual to ourselves. But I am a very heady person. Okay. I'm all up here. It's everything that I see is a concept. Everything I see is I'm relating it to something else. Everything I see, I have a subtext that I'm wondering about underneath. Everything I see, I'm seeing the implications, the end of what that person's saying. I'm understanding and perceiving all their mannerisms, and I'm seeing possibilities, and I'm thinking about it logically and why I could be right in these ways, and my intuition kicks, and I'm just going and going and going. And so for me, my experience of the world is very conceptual. It's very in my head. I can get, I don't know if you know the feeling, but when like, this is, again, if you were like me, not Greg, I want Greg after, if you're cool, to like explain the kind of little bit difference on your end, because I think it's a fun compare and contrast for how you experience and what the difference between what you have to go through to get presence. And it's like, for me, like, I have this constant, head buzz going of like thoughts and emotions and feelings and all these things. And the way you experience distraction is in different ways. And the way you, so there's a difference in, if you're a very heady person and you're kind of always in your head, you need to understand that about yourself and be like, present in the moment. Because if you're not, and you're up in your head, you're experiencing those thoughts in your head more than you're experiencing what's in front of you. Like, if you're like me, have you ever like played a scenario out in your head where like, you're just kind of imagining this storyline, picturing the people doing something in your head? It's like, well, if she said this, then she probably turn and say this, but you're not saying this or thinking this. It's just kind of, you're experiencing it. Like, have you ever done that and all of a sudden like kind of woke up back to reality and been like, right, I've been sitting here for a while, you know, and then go on doing what you're doing, because you were just in that moment that you were kind of gone, lost, experiencing that in your head. You had zero awareness of what was going on around you. Zero. Like there's probably some like subtle animal instinct, you know, stuff of awareness going around about you. But like if somebody walked within 2 feet of you, you would have no idea, because even if your eyes are open, because you are just so engrossed in this story that your conscious experience is off in these other things. And so like, so for me, like that's what happens is I'm not actually reading my book. I'm thinking about this story that this book reminded me of as my eyes are going across words, you know, and I would have to like flip back pages at times in my life, because I'm like, I don't even remember the last time I was here reading this, you know, and I didn't get anything out of it. And so, I mean, I'm a very heady person. So when you're lost in these things, you kind of like, it pulls your experience, and you're experiencing multiple things at a time, and your brain can actually only experience so many things at a time. So, you know, you're not getting the most out of yourself if you're not present in what you're doing.
Yeah, and I was it's funny, I was kind of play fighting with someone the other day. This is a weird story to throw in, but I want to throw it in, some potluck, right? So I'm kind of play fighting with someone the other day, right?
I don't think you can have a potluck with just 2 people.
2-person potluck. We'll have it.
It's a really lame pot. It's a really lame potluck. It's like we have to cook like 6 dishes each, and there's gonna be a lot of leftovers.
I'll call it Thanksgiving part 2. So essentially what happened was I was play fighting, right? And really it wasn't anything special, it wasn't anything serious, but I had this insight that happened, right? And it was really about presence, honestly. It was like I just noticed a lot of what happens in your physical environment, right? So we're talking about you know, your conscious experience, right? Well, for me, it's very logical. It's actually exceptionally logical, like as far as categorizing things, right? Like an apple is a fruit, right? Everything must be categorized and logically thought about. And then when I get into scenarios, right, I'm thinking about the logical implications that are most likely to happen in given situation X. That's literally all I do over and over and over and over and over again. Well, I was thinking, most of what people do, and most of what people's problem is in the real life, is they're not aware that they're not present, right? So there's, you know, it's exactly what Dan was talking about, right? You're reading a book, and you're reading the book, you're scanning the book, but you're thinking about the TV show that you just watched. And you're like, oh, this is an amazing TV show. I really like this. I'm gonna text this person. It was so good. I love that cliffhanger. And you're still reading. Something's still reading. Maybe, you know, it's unconscious, but it's happening, but you're not even there at all. And so what happens is you get to the end of the page and you're like, what did I just read? Because you don't know, because that whole minute you were actually, your conscious experience, what you were experiencing where you were, was you thinking about the TV show. You were thinking about the TV show while your eyes were reading. You weren't actually consciously aware of what was happening with the book, right? So it's a small distinction. But what happened for me, at least, was I noticed that a lot of the problems that we run into, they don't come from any like external source. They just come from the fact that you're not where you are, right? Let's say that there's 2 people, right? And they're both in a room, and they're both standing in a room by themselves, right? And one of them at all, right? They're just not. They're thinking about, you know, birthday cake or what they're gonna do tomorrow, right? There's always this tendency to think about past or future, and mindfulness circles, right? It's that you'll overlay the present, you'll overdo the present by talking and thinking about past and future. Oh man, you know, this morning it was so cold, and you know, I'm gonna have to pay my bill in my car now because it wouldn't start this morning, but that was this morning. Right? That was 6 hours ago. And you're still thinking about like, oh man, I'm not gonna be able to do this, or I have to go change a tire. But what are you doing then? What are you doing in that moment? Well, you're doing nothing. You're just thinking about this over and over again, right? So there's this tendency to think about the past or the future when you're right now, right? Well, the goal is to think about what's happening right now. Just stay with that, right? You stay in the now, you stay in the moment, right? And so you got 2 people in a room. One of them is present, one of them is not present. Well, here's what happens, right? Let's say I take a knife, right? Let's say I take a knife or a rock or a ball, and I throw it at their face, right? It's coming at them, right? Well, spatially, the one who's present is going to go, oh, there's a ball coming at my face. I can see this. I'm aware of this experience. Pop, and then, you know, grab it or whatever, right? It's no big deal. But the one who's off in La La Land thinking about what's going to be tomorrow, and they'll, what would you throw that at me for? What'd you do that for? because they weren't even aware, right? They weren't even in this experience. So when we talk about being present, right, that's a really strong definition of it. So you can really key in and get what it means. It's not that anything new is happening, right? It's that you're just actually experiencing where you are in that moment, right? So if you have issues with that, or maybe you hadn't thought about it that in that way before, right? A lot of what we're going to talk about, and we're going to give you some really practical, concrete tips in a second here to get you started and moving on this towards success, right? Because it's all about success, at least here. But one of the things to know is if you define it that way, right? If you define it that way, you'll start to see all the times when you're not being present, when you're thinking about other stuff, when you're wondering if that text is coming, right? You're not here. You're not here. And maybe you're not here now. Maybe right now you've been thinking about other stuff like, oh, I like this. And this is great. And this relates to this book that I read. And that's so interesting. And oh man, I saw a video like this before. You're not present, right? So the goal is to train yourself to stay more and more present. It gives you more power. It gives you more options. It gives you more ability to see what's actually going on.
Well, and I mean, for a long time I had some resistance to teaching this because just things like meditation get so just I don't know, they get the wrong vibe. They get the wrong, people paint the wrong picture of what it can be for you, because and consciousness work and mindfulness work and presence is something that's primarily talked about and used in a way that's a self-development, alleviation from suffering, becoming self-aware, one with yourself, understanding all about yourself, and we go as far as to, ego separation and all these things, and where you kind of detach from the self, which can cause this suffering. And I had this resistance to teaching this at first because I wasn't sure how people were going to be able to handle it. But I think it's important to understand the ability to bring yourself into a different state of mind. It's not a spiritual or existential experience. It's a physiological response based on what I know and the truth about the physiology of your brain and the neuroscience of your brain and how the brain works. And what people need to realize is that it's some of the exercises that we're going to talk about are just going to sound like they're going to sound heady, like, oh, I just say this and this will work. Well, the idea is that you're like, you need to ground yourself. You need to be able to start creating gaps, space, and times, extended periods of times where you're only present where you are and what you were doing. And to do that, sometimes it takes a little convincing, for yourself, sometimes, like, we go back to what I was saying, oh, I can't get my mind to be quiet. I can't not think. There's too much chatter. I don't know how to meditate. I can't turn off my thoughts, or I can't do all this, and I have to do this. And you can come up with all this stuff, but all that is just chatter. And you're right. You can't, and you maybe can't right now, but that doesn't mean that it's impossible. That doesn't mean that with practice, you couldn't become better at it. And I think it's important because you're essentially without, when you said something earlier, what did you say? You said, you're living in the consequences of something 6 hours after, it happened. It's like, it made me think, I'm like, every time something happens, there's instant consequences, instant. You might not actually experience them yet, but because that, that as soon as your car broke down, that equaled like putting them in the shop and there was going to be a bill. And so since that time, you've been thinking about all these things that are going to happen. But you are allowing what's already chosen, what's already decided to affect how you behave now. Why? Why do you have to be upset about your car being in the shop? Why is that pulling your attention? Is there anything that you can actually do? I think a part of this big thing when I was talking about the exercises, it's a lot about letting go of these thoughts, and trying to push these thoughts out. Now, I'm not actually talking about meditation, even though that's a great practice for building focus and controlling that muscle, that proverbial muscle in the mind that controls thoughts. It's like it's a centering exercise where, like, you talked about the past, you're thinking about the past. A lot of times I'll find myself just in so many places that I would have to, just stop, take a deep breath and be like, no past. I want no thoughts about the past. You know, I'm letting all thoughts go about the past. I don't need. And honestly, what I noticed is that when you start to do that, all the thoughts that you were distracted by and being pulled for start coming up to you. Like, oh, you mean this? Like, oh, you mean this? And it's like, and you're like, yeah, those. I'm letting those go. I don't know past. I don't want any past right now. I have no past. You know, and then you say no future. No, you know, I'm going to live with no thoughts about the future right now. You know, and you know, those thoughts, they kind of like, no, you mean this? Oh, you mean this? Oh, you mean this? Like, yeah, those. Just let those go. I'm just letting those go. No future, no past. You know, and then it's from, you know, you can walk down this kind of path like that, and because that's actually, and one of the other ones I'd say, because no past and no future is good for when you're trying to focus yourself into work, but the other is no next. You know, because a lot of times we're sitting there doing something, but we're thinking about what's next. A lot of times, most of what's in our head is what's coming up shortly after we get done with what we're doing here. And so, you know, you say no next. I want no thoughts about the next, no next, only this now. And your brain will be like, oh, you mean this? Oh, you mean this? And you're like, yeah, those things. No next. I have nothing coming after this. This is all that I'm doing. So no past, no future, no next. And you know, and I would say these things to myself, and it would just ground me. And now, granted, I've had a large amount of experience in consciousness work, mindfulness work, and self-development and cognitive behavioral therapy. That I've kind of, not to be like, you know, arrogant, but like I've kind of trained my brain to be very receptive to these ideals. You know, I'm very controlled in my thoughts. I don't allow just random crap to just creep around in my head anymore. It is possible to control your thoughts. I've done it. I used to have crippling anxiety that just flooded me with tons of thoughts. And now if I want, there can be absolute silence. And I did that over time. And so, you know, it takes time also to build these skills. And that's why mindfulness in consciousness work is actually something you need to take up as a practice and a lifestyle as well as this. You know, you become present, and, you know, for you to do that, you go through this, you go through that exercise, whatever it is. You know, if you need to take what I said and individualize it for yourself, then great. You know, do that. You know, take something that you know, identify. The whole point is just bringing yourself, identifying that you're distracted, identifying what's distracting you, because it's only those things. Look, the only things that you are distracted by, or that are in your head, and are the basis of pretty much everything, are the past, the future, your desires, your imagination, and your next, and your identity and self-identity. It's one of those. And so you can walk yourself through all these things and say, no more of these. I want none of these. I want no past. I want no self-identity. I want no desires, no imagination. And you'd be amazed at like, oh, this. Yeah, those things, I'm letting those go, because your brain is, but you can't consciously hold all of that stuff in your head in your conscious experience, but you know, you're kind of randomly being pulled. So, you know, identifying these and saying I'm letting them go, it's like giving your brain an instruction. You're like, no, I'm only thinking about this. I'm only, while trying to focus on what you're doing, just telling yourself I'm only thinking of this, no past, no future, whatever. One of those things that I was mentioning, you know, and I'll go over them again because they're important, and remember these because you can identify these. I've noticed that almost everything that you think about is one of these things. It's self-identity, past, future, desires, imagination, or what's next. And it's those things that pull our mind. And so if you can identify, oh, I'm just, you know, you're creating a scenario in your head, no imagination, you'd be amazed at how fast that diffuses that. When you identify that that's what you're doing. Oh, I'm using my imagination right now. No, I want to let that go. No imagination. You know, you can feel yourself kind of get grounded and centered into what you're doing. And it's not hokey. It's physiological. It's psychological. You're instructing your brain. You're guiding your thoughts and your mind in a way that you're in control of. And if you're not in control of your thoughts, have we done a video on controlling thoughts yet?
I don't think we have.
We're gonna have to do that. We're gonna have to do that real soon. We're gonna have to do that real soon. But we'll talk about some ways that you can do thought replacement. You know, cognitive dissonance. How to identify how thoughts see and feel. Anyway, we'll get there. But like, you know, gaining control over your thoughts is a big part. That's self-control of the mind. Is a big part of this, and this helps you and trains you in that way, you know, to be able to, and that's the exercise that I've probably found for myself is probably the most beneficial for me because I'm such in a heady space. You know, is there any exercises that are different for you that get you, you know, because I know you're more of a, you know, I know your personality types, you're extroverted sensing, so you're a little more naturally present than I am. in your demeanor. And so what is it like for you to get yourself, into presence? What exercises or what tools could you maybe think of that you use for somebody who's a little bit more of in their body,
I think I'm gonna plug practices, because I got some really good ones, and I got some really good understanding of sort of how my physiology works, how my brain works, literally the parts of my brain that activate when what happens, whatever. That's great, and I'm gonna plug that, but I want to put that on the shelf for a second, because I can see something already that's going to be a problem, and I want to nip it right here, right? So someone, if you just heard what he said, someone might say, right, and it would be a person like myself in the past, you might say, well, if I'm doing all this and I'm getting rid of all these channels, if I'm not, activating next and imagination and my identity and all, if I'm not doing that, how will I get anything done? I want to be successful. How will I get anything done if I'm not doing that? You have to plan. You've got to be able to plan. You've got to be able to make choices for the future. My future is important. I want to be successful. I've got to think about my past, because this was where I came from. Like, I need to know that stuff right now. Like, what I was doing yesterday? Yeah, I need to think about that. I was making a list yesterday. Okay, so I was making a list yesterday. What was my list about? I got to make a list again right now, because I need to do this tomorrow, right? You might say that you need these things to be successful, to be moving forward in the direction, right? But that's another form of very sticky resistance, very sneaky resistance, right? It's the fox in the barnyard, right? Because what happens is that whole process is also keeping you from being present, right? It's that whole process of you trying to walk through logically why you need to not stay present is another way that you can keep from becoming present, right? In that moment where you're like, well, what if it's this reason and this reason is this reason and this reason and this reason? That's the future, or yourself, right? It's you planning, it's you thinking, and it's not that you can't plan. It's not that you can't do anything, because if you think about it, if you really just sit on it for a second and breathe in and think, all of your decisions are made from here. They're made from right now, right? If you want to do something, let's say that someone calls you, they call you up, right? Say, hey, you want to go bowling in 3 days, right? And they hang up and they ask you the question, and you'd made the decision and you told them, yeah, I would like that. I'd like to do that. Okay. You made that decision from here. You made that decision from now, from right now, this moment, right? And it projects forward, and maybe in 3 days they'll hit you up and whatever, but you don't need to think about that anymore. Like, you've moved on beyond that, unless you're actually planning, okay, like I need to go to this place. It's not relevant for you to continue to well, I wonder what's going to happen when we do this. And I wonder if this is going to be fun. And I wonder what place we're going to go to. And because you're constantly just destroying your experience of right now with thinking about what's going to happen, thinking about what might happen. And what happens if it doesn't happen? Like, what if it doesn't happen in that way? You wasted all of your moments right here, right? The things that you could have been experiencing, the show you could have been watching with, your spouse, or, the experience you're having with your son or your family member, or, a business partner. These things you're constantly overlaying and really chopping up the experience, right? You're dicing it up into little baby carrots when you could have the whole thing. You could have the whole garden, but you're choosing not to, right? So a lot of times this resistance in the form of, I need to be successful, so I have to use my mind to plan, and I need to do this, and that's just see it when it comes up, because you will experience it. Everyone experiences it. It's your mind trying to logic you into seeing why not being present makes more sense than being present, and it never will, and it never can, because you'll start to notice that, oh, right, this is just another distraction. I can get rid of this, right? So to really plug that in and chop that up before I moved into some of the practices for people who might be like myself, because you might have been thinking that, right? That might have crept in. So we've dealt with that, right? We've dealt with that, and if that kind of registered for you, good, right? So I'm going to give you some practices. That I do, right? And so for me, my conscious experience is like I said, it's very logical implications. This is that, probability, decisions, weighing the odds, but it's also very physical, right? It's very physical. Like, all my decisions are made from, I see this thing, this body language here, this body language here. These pieces of information in the physical space equal this, right? So there's an inherent presence in everyone. And this is not, I'm not referencing anything mystical. So it's not that. I'm saying that there's an optimal way for you to become present. If you notice what you're doing, right? So for me, my kind of go-to is to take things apart logically. Oh, what is this? Oh, what does this do? What is this part here? What is this person? What does this mean? What? Just be in that, right? For you, you might think long game, right? You might be thinking, oh man, what are the long-term effects of me having a relationship with this person that I just met yesterday? Like you might meet a person and think that, like you're, oh, look at how they're dressed and look at their friends, and you're obsessing over what this means, right? You look for very deep levels of meaning for the long game, for the long term, right? You're not thinking, what am I going to do to make $5,000? You're thinking, how can I make $100,000 in the next 10 years doing this one thing with this group of people? You've got it all planned out, right? You're a planner. Maybe that's you, right? Maybe that's who you are. Or maybe you get caught up. Maybe you get caught up very easily and very quickly into your feelings, right? Your space of feeling, right? The feelings that you have about people or yourself or your value system or whatever, right? There's a whole lot of other ways your consciousness, your experience could be manifesting. And what I mean by that is how you're experiencing the world, because we all experience the world differently, right? Some people are quiet, some people are loud, some people are tall, some people are short. You have this, there's just as much differences here because your experiences are different, right? So once you start to identify what it is that you tend towards, right? Are you overly logical? Are you very people-centric, right? And here's a really fun and easy heuristic to remember that'll help you really categorize who you are. And it'll really help you, right? There's two kinds of people, only two. There's people, and there's thing people. That's all there is. There's people, and there's thing people. So if you find out which one you are, do you run around people? Do you really enjoy, social settings? Do you really enjoy having conversations with people that you like and people that you don't like? Just, kind of bantering, having fun. When you hear a story, right? Do you want to relate it to what's actually happening logically or technically or the items involved? Or are you thinking people, right? That's a people person. You're a people, right? But you could also be a thing person, right? You could be very, what does this mean? What is this logically? How does this work? Can I take this apart? People start telling you about people and your eyes kind of glaze over. And then you hear something about some interesting thing in the story. And you're like, yeah, what is that? What is that? How does that work? What is that? Ooh, what is that? I saw something, right? You're a thing person, right? So this distinction is a really easy way for you to figure out where it is you need to start tackling to become more present. But there's a lot of ways you could go into this, right? There's a lot of different methods and tools you could use to become more present more quickly.
Yeah, and I think that it comes from a place of self-awareness to know kind of what I was saying with this is all kind of individualized to each person and kind of what their own needs are. And that comes from a place of self-awareness. That comes from a place of knowing what it is that distracts you, knowing what pulls you, and being able to see that happen in your own mind in the moment. We make this sound so like complex or, even just important or like there's so many implications to this, but we talk about this in such a complex way, but it's really as simple as you need to work on building focus, and to put it in practical terms. And it's not that, because I think presence also, focus is making yourself, stay on task. That's not necessarily being fully present in that task. It's like, this is just like next level focus. This is like hyper focus, is that is put another way, if that helps you understand, if you're this far in and still not understanding, but this is a really very vital part. Like the people don't realize also that there's so many hidden benefits to this. Like there's just so many like little like other areas in your life that you're going to see that once you've started working on your ability to be more present, you'll see them benefit, like your relationships with other people, your friendships, your relationships with your coworkers and your managers, relationships with your family, you'll start your own happiness, your own conscious experience, will be more enjoyable because you've gotten to a place where you can focus and be everywhere that you want to be and not be pulled so many different places. You can become people will feel like they're getting the most out of you, that you're dedicated and really truly here and feel like you're giving them their full attention, and people will appreciate that because it's like, oh wow, they're just like really like interested in what I have to say and what I'm talking about, and they're asking questions and they're curious and they're not like on their phone or distracted. It's just like you can gain respect from people, you can make great impressions on people, which can help you with further opportunities in the future. There's just so many different ways that being able to be present can actually benefit your life. That's why we talk about it at such length and in such extent on something that's really as simple as controlling your mind to only think about what you are doing in front of you each moment, you know?
Mm. Yeah, and I think you can see it fairly easily in day-to-day life. Uh, if maybe you're listening and you've had an experience, and I'll explain the experience, right? Because it's everyone's kind of got this in their mind bank, right? You could remember a time when this happened to you. Let's say you're on a date, right? Let's say you're on a date, and maybe you've been excited about it for a little bit. Like, maybe you've been kind of thinking like, oh, this is it. This is the date. This is the one. This is the day, right? And however that worked out for you, right? The person who you were with, the experiences you guys did, hanging out, going somewhere, whatever, hanging out with friends, whatever you did, whatever you did. Imagine there's a person who you're on a date with. You're attracted to them. You like them. You're cool. And there's a difference. There's a difference between this person and other people, because this person actually looks at you. They actually look at you, right? They look at you in the moment. When you look at them, you know that they're looking at you. And I mean that in the sense of like, you get this spike, right? You almost want to look away because they're looking at you, who you are. Like, they're trying to probe, and like, they're present with you, right? They're there with you. They're not looking at you and thinking this person's this and this is this, and or you had this experience where you look at people and they're not at all there. Like, their eyes are glazed over. They're thinking about what they ate for lunch. They're just kind of auto walking, like they're walking like this, and right. So you look at them, and then they just, hi, hi, like, how you doing? Just like, where were you? Where were you? Like, where were you for this last, 5 minutes you've been in line here? And I tap on your shoulder, and you turn around like someone's going to rob you because they're not present, right? So that experience, the difference in the experience, right? It's like, you can connect with people on such a deep level. You can connect with your life on such a deep level. You feel better because you actually start to notice more things. You start to see more things that you didn't see before, right? And that creates opportunities, right? That creates strategies that you can use to create even more opportunities. You'll see more people. You'll see more things that they're doing, right? You'll have more success. You'll feel better, right? It's a lot. All these things come down to how you're interacting with people, right? Whether or not you see them for who they are in the moment, or you're projecting all this stuff, you're thinking all these things, right? So when you start to put some of these practices in, and I know you're hungry, I know you're ready. We'll talk about those just after this, right? If once you start to implement them, right? Not only, Dan was talking about all the benefits that you get, right? And there's an absurd amount of benefits from just being present, but not only that, you feel better because you're actually experiencing the world that you're in, right? And other people notice that. They can feel it on you, they can see it on you. Like, man, like this, there's something about you. Like, there's something about you. It's not anything special. It's not anything mystical. They're just there.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just as simply as that. Like, and I think the number one practice I've had is come from a place of finding a level of self-awareness, and identifying, that I was very a heady person, and that concept and ideas would kind of keep me in line and keep me focused, and that I needed to lead my mind and guide my mind, because everything seemed to manifest as a thought and start as a thought in my experience. And so, for me, I spend a lot of time saying, like, I'll be an emotion, or a negative emotion will start to afflict me. And I'll just, I'd be like, no, past, I'm not dealing with any of that right now. And I'd be like, oh, you mean that? Oh, you mean that? I'm like, yeah, those two things. Like, I don't want any of that. And I kind of circle back, because that's really, really what this comes down to is being able to center yourself through guiding your mind. And it feels silly or stupid sometimes, or uncomfortable to like talk to yourself, or, think these things and guide yourself in these ways. But it's actually very helpful for you. It's actually very centering and grounding, and puts you in the moment by talking yourself through letting go the past, the future, your desires, imagination. So like now, honestly, you don't want to go too mindless, honestly, because then you're just not really being productive. But a lot of times you'd be amazed at how much you can just kind of quiet in your mind by focusing on them in specific ways like that, like past, like identifying like no past, no future, that takes care of a lot. Like, because your past is everything that's happened up until this now. Okay, well, if you're not thinking about anything before this, then that pretty much covers everything. And your mind will like think, like try to bring up those thoughts again. And they don't, your mind's not being helpful here and saying like, oh, here you go. Like, yeah, this is the thought you want me to get rid of. Let me get rid of that for you. It's more like it's coming back up to your mind. And now you're at a place where you're conscious of your thoughts coming to your head. And so you're like, yeah, that's like, can we, off? Like, I'd like to just be here right now. That's not helpful. It's not productive. Like, and then like, so yeah, no past. I'm letting go of the past. And so, that walk through those things that I gave you in those steps of, no past, no future, no desire, no imagination, no self-identity, no next. Those things are things that really help identify where your thoughts are coming from, and talking about them in that kind of broad but yet specific, defining manner can neutralize them a lot of times. And especially if you're in the mode where you're trying to focus, like you have a conscious intent and will to be focusing right now. So like, that's what your intention is. This is just to like help you get your mind quiet, So that's honestly probably the best tip I can give somebody to somebody who is maybe a heady person with a lot of thoughts and needs a practice kind of shutting those avenues and channels down so they can only use those channels for what's in front of them.
So what are some maybe more practical tools like the now next identity thing? And I want to slide some in because I got some really good ones, honestly. There's a style of meditation that you can pick up, and it's essentially what you're doing. There's a lot of names for it, but essentially what you're doing is you take an object or an item, and it doesn't have to be a physical object, right? It could be a mental object. It could be anything that you want, right? So if I tell you to imagine a red circle or an orange triangle, and in your mind you see that, right? You could keep your focus on that. You could actually focus on that. Okay, orange triangle, and you see that in your mind, whatever that means to you. You hold it there, right? Or you could take a pencil and you could stick it in, I don't know, some Jello or in a ground, whatever, and you look at it. And so this style,
are you talking about Tritaka?
Right? Yeah, I think that's one of.
I think originally it was called Tritaka. Yeah, I think one of the original ones was called Tritaka, and it was open flame meditation where you actually stared at a flame. But yeah, anyway, sorry, I was just clarifying. Keep going.
Yeah. So you start this, right, and you could use a flame if you want to. That's a really good way to start. But what happens is the goal is for you to bring your awareness into this one object, this one, and it seems very, very annoying because you'll start doing it and you're like, I don't need to do this. Like I don't need to do this, right? But you do need to do it because the whole point of the reason why you don't want to do it is because you're not used to it. You're not practiced in. You take a cup. You stick it on a counter and you just look at that cup, and all the thoughts that come up, that's like, I don't want to do this. I don't like this. I don't want to look at this. This is stupid. Well, because you're focused on looking at that cup, you can actually see them. You can actually see them coming up, right? That's a huge thing. It's a huge thing because then you'll say, oh, this is what it's like when I'm choosing to do something and I'm not present with it because I'm thinking about a bunch of other things and getting dragged off. What if this and this is stupid? So the more you do that, and the purpose of it is for you to take your own awareness, for you to train your own mind to stay focused, to stay laser focused on what it is that you're actually doing. And you will notice it's very slight, it's very gradual, right? But you'll notice that the more and more you do this, right, the better and better you get at actually making this work for you, right? You see an object, you stare at it, you look at it, you hear it, whatever it is, the channel that you want to do, right? Whatever way you want to make this work, open flame, but you really get in with it and you stay there. You'll notice it creates more and more space in your mind, right? So when you go to work, instead of seeing, you're walking through your workspace, right? You open the doors and there's a bunch of people and there's someone who's drinking coffee and someone spills something on the floor and there's yammering and your boss is over here yelling at this person and you're doing, and your desk is at the other end of the room. You'll notice that when you walk to the desk, right, when you're looking at the desk, you're not getting pulled by all these things, by all these conversations, by all these noises and texts and, oh, did you hear this? And you're not, because you're very focused. You're moving towards your goal, which is, your desk, or success, right? So in the same way, once you get control over your own mental space, right, and are able to target it in and zoom it in, it creates more options for you because you actually are not getting pulled by all these different things. And that's one practice, right? There's a huge number of practice. I mean, the identifying what's actually happening, you know, past, now, next, like identity, these like putting labels on them is absurdly helpful. But at the end of the day, you have to start to train yourself, right? Because think about it. Just remember how long you haven't been doing this, right? You know, maybe you're reading books about how to be present, you know, staying in the now, or you've been just started doing mindfulness, and it's something that you, okay, this is cool, I like this, you know, it's useful, I'm very zen, right? Well, how long have you not been doing this? How long have you been just spending your time going with whatever thoughts come up, just being yanked around? Like, that's a lot of time. It's an investment, right? If I told you, and you probably got at least 5 years under your belt, maybe 10, maybe 20, maybe 30, right? If I told you that you had a job offer, right, and you told me that you had 5 years of experience, or 10 years of experience, or 20 years of experience, you would be a professional. I would call you a professional, right? So you are a professional at not staying present. You're very good at it. You're very good at not staying present, right? So the goal is to rewire that, to turn it around so you can become more present more often.
Yeah, and I think another one that I thought of was, I think it's non-determination sitting, where you know, essentially you sit down. You sit down just with the intent to sit, with just sitting there. But you're just going to sit down and stay down there. You don't set an amount of time. You're just going to sit, and you sit down and you start to observe and notice the thoughts that start to come up. All you're doing is observing the resistance. All you're doing is feeling the urge to move, like, oh, I want to move my leg, and you notice that, or what thoughts come to your head, like, oh, I'm starting to think about this. And you just sit there and just watch yourself think, you watch yourself react and get uncomfortable and want to adjust and feel your body and kind of, is there any pain? You know, where's the gravity kind of pulling you? You know, you just sit there and you kind of just observe the thoughts that are coming to your head, and observe the emotions or memories or any kind of distractions. You just observe that, because what you're doing there is you're learning the ability to kind of see how you react to things, and how your brain kind of, what thoughts get brought up, you know, and if you can do this and you start to observe in a pattern. And I just want to slide in this, because I've kind of, and maybe I'm projecting here because I've had enough people ignore my advice lately. I've had just these couple people, that have just ignored my advice completely, just to run into the exact problem that I was warning them about. And it's just kind of frustrating. And then I would ask them questions like, well, because we've talked, and they're very intelligible, and they know about self-development. They know what they need to do, you know, like, so I'll ask them, I'm like, well, are you doing your positive affirmations? And they're like, well, you know, I'm kind of like, no, like, well, are you meditating? And they're like, well, I mean, I do, you know, I kind of, not really. And well, I mean, okay, are you doing what about this? Are you documenting your thoughts? Are you observing your thoughts? Are you maybe coming up with more neutralizing statements, positive things that you can say to yourself when those thoughts come up? Like, are you actually giving time to your self-inquiry? Or, like, you know, and all these things are no. And only way that you're going to change your life is implementing new practices, new processes. It involves taking action. It involves actually doing something about it, because if you're not willing to actually take an action and actually make a change, then nothing is going to change. Just nothing. If you think that you're waiting for something on this video that's going to be like, oh, everything's better. No, it takes you actually doing it. It takes you actually giving the effort. And I just don't get it. Like, I just don't get it sometimes with people, because, like, I don't know if, I'm sure if you're still here with us and you're a repeat listener, you're one of us, and you can understand this, where it's like people get in their own way. They don't actually make a change in their life, and then they expect, it's like, why don't you value your own future? Why is it your desires and your goals aren't something that are important enough to actually make change? Why do I have to convince anybody to make, it's, you know, self-development? I chose my field, but it's like, it's just so silly to me sometimes that I have to convince people to do things that they know are helpful and beneficial, that I've come up with them through coaching and advice, you know, type of phone calls and, you know, conversations, and custom fit this advice that I have, that I generally give to people, and just to see them not use it and then come back and complain about the same thing. And it's like, well, my advice is the same. Like, that's what I started doing, is I started giving people the exact same advice. because it's like, no, there is no other advice. I'm not giving you new advice until you follow my old advice. So this takes you making a change and implementing a new process, a new habit that you can develop for your brain to catch on to, which so it'll make it become easier and easier and easier over time. It's not going to be easy at first. It's not going to work very well at first, but over time, if you give this the conscious focus, you'll become better at it. You will become an expert at it, and you can actually master the ability to be present in the moment when you need to on command.
Yeah, and it's not a training. This is a key point. I mean, because you're gonna put this in a box, right? You're gonna put this in a box, and well, this seems like it's a lot, and I have to do this stuff, and it's not a training. This is not a training. This is not a training. This is not a school class. This is not a lecture. This is a way out. This is an opportunity, right? This is a way to move you from wherever you are, right? Future, right? He's talking about, why is it that people need to be convinced? Why do they need to be convinced to work on their own future, to just change a couple things and to be able to get what they want? Well, I don't know the answer to that question, right? I don't know the answer, but I do know that if you do that, you're not just working on your future, because that's one way of saying, but you're actually moving to get what you want, right? Because if you don't do that, if you don't make these changes, if you don't make the changes where you need to, right, in your own self, in your own life, and try to reorient and get more skills and become a better person in the way that you need to, you're not going to get what you want. I don't honestly care. It could be better relationships. Maybe you just want to feel more secure where you are now. Maybe you don't like the situation you are in financially, or with people, or with your job, or whatever it is. You want to feel that deep sense of like, okay, I'm okay. Like, I'm good. I feel safer. I feel happier. I feel more in my own mind. I feel more self-love, more patience, all these kinds of, really great virtues and all this kind of stuff. But really what this comes from is doing, right? It comes from starting. It comes from moving. It comes from taking that boulder, right? Pushing it over the hill and watching it roll down, right? That's momentum. And so if you don't ever actually choose to start doing these things, these practices, putting them into action, moving on them, studying more, watching videos, being present, doing these things consistently, right? It's an opportunity that you're rejecting. You're rejecting it over and over and over again, because every time this stuff happens, right? You see some video pop up in your feed. It's like, how to get over this, and how to stop doing this, and how to make your life better, and how to make more money. And you're like, I don't need that. I don't need that. You are actively choosing not to take opportunities that are right there. They're right there. They're right there. And they're helping you to orient towards your own success and getting what you want. So today, right now, being present as you are, if you're still watching this, do it. Make the decision, make the choice, take an action. Like, take one of these practices, right? And, just plot out 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. And after this video, go just sit down and do it, or go make the call and do it. Whatever it is, like whatever you need to do to train yourself to be a little bit more present, take the opportunity, right? Take the lifeline and go do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sums it up, man. We've pretty much covered it. It's pretty important. We're gonna do a thought. For those of you that are feeling like maybe you don't have control over your thoughts, fear not. I feel like we're gonna cover that in a video pretty extensively. It is possible. It is a habit that gets trained. It is a way of if you're watching this video and you want some help now, and you maybe don't have time to listen to another one right now, or I just look up some cognitive behavioral therapy practices and what they talk about in rewiring your brain. Use that keyword cognitive, CBT, rewire my brain. You'll get a lot of information, some basic information that can help you if maybe you're just in a pinch, you need some quick information, whatever the case is. I just don't want to leave you out there thinking, oh man, I can't control my thoughts. What am I going to do? This is about me controlling my thoughts. Well, it is a task, but it is possible. And so we're going to cover that, but I don't want you to be helpless. So, go look that up and try to find some, fairly creditable. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, guys. We'll see you soon.